Nubар, years ago, you once said something like, Aurora was really founded on the premise that there are people who are risking their lives to save thousands of others in the worst of humanitarian crisis. And this quote sounds incredibly true today, in today's context. And I would like to ask you maybe to go a bit more into this from your perspective.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you, dear family, friends all around the world. It is indeed both a pleasure, honor, and also a difficult moment for us to be isolated the way we are on the 105th anniversary of or commemoration of the Armenian genocide, when at that time Armenians became extremely isolated as well from each other in the world. What happened 105 years ago that later became characterized as a genocide, the mass atrocity, was a man-made event. And that event thrust the Armenian people for the century to follow in a search for justice, for understanding, for recovery, for strength, and for a place in the world, a new place in the world, and a voice. At the centennial 5 years ago, the Aurora Prize in Humanitarian Initiative was launched to get a better understanding of what happened. And in doing so, we realized that in addition to the victims and the criminals, there were also at that point survivors and saviors who were born. And the human spirit that motivates people to save others is one that very few of us have experienced, but many Armenians, are the beneficiaries of. And as we looked into that concept, we realized that to honor those saviors, we needed to do nothing more than to find modern day saviors. And that's what launched the Spirit of Aurora. Now, we're living at a time when that same spirit is being thrust upon all of the world. There are modern day saviors in every community, and there are survivors who can't understand why this is happening with the virus and the senselessness and the despair that Armenians felt 105 years ago. And so while I don't want to create an association between what we're living in the world and what happened to Armenians, I can't but point out that while the perpetrator is different, the effect is much the same, and the scale is now global. And the reason I bring that out is because our mission of bringing the world's attention and humanitarian aid to these situations is particularly appropriate and should be understandable in every family, in every corner, given what's happening. We talk about gratitude in action. It can't but be that when one's life is saved, they are filled for generations with a sense of gratitude. And we live at a time when that gratitude can be expressed in humanitarian actions, in helping others everywhere. So while last year, a lot of you watched Aurora and thought, well, it's good that people are doing this, we support them. And of course, we're so far from the places where these actions are being taken, but we appreciate meeting the people, hearing their stories. Well, for everybody that's listening, you can be a humanitarian today because the need is there right around the corner. So sorry that I'm a little bit moved by this, but I think the message is that the spirit of gratitude can be as much of an infection as a virus. It's an infection for good, not an infection for bad. And that's the message that we really want to bring to the world. So in deciding to go forward with the event today, it was a sense of responsibility that we are commemorating something that is being in part relived, and we ought to be the voice that brings this to the world's attention.
Thank you, Nubbar. these very moving words. And I'm really sorry if I change again now to the virus. You mentioned it, it's tough times and we all have a chance to do our part. There are a lot of eyes on you these days, Nubara, because in this crisis, there is also hope. And one of this is the promising process of developing a vaccine against the coronavirus. And that is happening through one of your companies, that is Moderna Therapeutics. And I know that I'm asking this because I know a lot of people ask themselves, and the news is full of it. The question is, developing and successfully testing a vaccine is one thing, but let's say, how long would it go until a country like Armenia would have access to a vaccine in these days, in this crisis?
Well, Nicola, the topic of developing, whether it's better tests, better treatments, and better vaccines or vaccines for this disease, is one that is consuming scientists all over the world, tens of thousands of them. And while they may not be able to care for patients, they are caring for the future patients by enabling the technologies that we so desperately need. I have described what's going on today as essentially a biological battle between the social nature of human beings and the invasive nature of a virus that transmits itself exactly because of our social nature. And this is kind of a fairly, it's certainly precedented, but it's unprecedented in our modern time, certainly in the last century, in its scale. And because we have so much more mobility, we have to defend ourselves with better and better technology. The isolation we're all feeling is a first step, but of course the whole world is working on and hoping that a vaccine or multiple vaccines can be developed, and we have the burden and opportunity to be one of the companies that is working on this. There's a lot of uncertainty. This is no different than the kind of aid that is needed, for example, to be brought to bear on refugee crises. People do whatever they can to help the situation, and in this case, it's science that tries to help. In terms of countries like Armenia, I can tell you that the effort that is underway is meant to be addressing the whole world. It is the case that we live in an uncomfortably nationalistic time, and various countries, especially powerful ones, seem to be more interested in defending their own interests than the whole world. But in the end, I'm quite sure that the population around the world will demand solutions that are available to everybody on the planet. I think this whole crisis will bring people together, remind people why we need institutions that are global institutions that came about in the last century that seem to be weakening. And it will be the responsibility of international institutions such as World Health Organization, such as the Gates Foundation for certain countries, CEPI, which is a big vaccine alliance. We are certainly, as are others, working with all of them to make sure that vaccines reach every country. And of course, since we are Armenians, Armenia is a beneficiary of that as well. And so this is an international crisis. It needs international solutions. And I think people should realize that we do have, as humans, the capacity, the finances, and we're going to have to help each other make it through this uncertain period until we can recover. And then, as Ara said very eloquently earlier, we have to pledge not to have this happen again. And these kinds of catastrophes are in fact avoidable. This may not be man-made, but it doesn't make it unavoidable. We can avoid these things, we can prevent these things, and I very much, coming out of this, and many colleagues are committed to taking a pledge of never again, just like these pledges were taken post the Holocaust, post the genocide. Unfortunately, not as effectively as we would like history to record, but nevertheless, we'd really have to do that for this type of a crisis as well.